I am very happy to be presenting these ideas. Uh, mm, that ideas are something I was working a long time. Um, I will provide some elements and perspectives regarding how it's possible to carry out philosophical practices through corporal actions. But to understand this, first we must understand some general assumptions and principles around a broad understanding of philosophy and philosophical practice in general. After laying these foundations, I will focus on three great ways of performing corporal actions as part of the work that is done in philosophical practice. So, tell me if you cannot listen to me in some moment. If all is going well, I will continue. To begin with these ideas, I have to refer to some epistemological elements in somewhat general way. Philosophy is often thought to be defined by thinking, using language, making good questions, or developing or critical thinking. Certainly, all these things can undoubtedly be part of philosophy. They touch various areas of what it is or can be philosophy, but they do not cover, none of them, what philosophy is. I dare to make such strong statements from the beginning because I am sure that no one, or almost no one, wants a philosophical task that takes refuge only within the framework of thinking. We are all interested in ideas when they are linked to the world we live in. Although the questions may be extremely important and much of our philosophy and philosophical practice thrive on them, they only generate thought at first. A question can certainly move me to act, but only if I decode it first, analyze it first, and then take a decision. Only thereafter is a question related to an action. The action is different thing from the question, later but not implied in the first. I mean, the question is to almost value, but without so much difficulty, we could imagine circumstances where the important thing is to act, not to ask ourselves. And precisely that action or reaction different from the questions could be the most transcendent and philosophical thing that could be done. In the words of the great pedagogue Paulo Freire from Brazil, he said, I must use all the possibilities within my research, not only to talk about my utopia, but to participate in practices consistent with it. Finally, no one would believe a theorist of justice who is not fair in his actions, to a theorist of friendship who cannot have a friend. Which of these characters are the one that interest us? Although the importance of the theory is undeniable, evidently its only value is given thanks to the possibility that we have to link ourselves with the things to which the theory refers. That's something for me very important, the things to which the theory refers. Thinking about justice or friendship makes sense. That's to the vast group of fair or friendly actions that exist or could exist. With the language and critical thinkings is quite a similar question. The existence is useless to me without the subject activating and transforming his way of life. Why talk or think about the confinement, coherence, harmony, violence, hospitality, the event, etc., if these are not or couldn't be in the world? If this were so, philosophy could simply speak of any subject and would then have no social interest. But philosophy is born, and not only that, is carried out together in the world of our corporal action. as well as the living processuality that we are. It goes through our life as a procedural coherence, as interconnection currents, as courses of existence that are related to the meaning that we can give and live in our human becoming. Philosophy happens inside the game, not just in our minds. Thus, it can be said that philosophy exists or is present in different areas of our life. And the most logical thing is that it's more in some areas than in others. Sometimes we find ourselves with philosophical levels almost close to zero. Other times, philosophy bursts forth with great vigor into our life and our environment. But even if it seems that something that someone does is not at all philosophical, it is necessary to see with a little more care to note that all the acts that we carry out or possess, even if only a minimal degree of philosophy, at least in a germinal form. The idea that philosophy is part in our life, at least in a germinal way, is an idea that I developed in another work. The point is that the great focus or interest that philosophy has had in thought and language processes has also dragged philosophical practice into a similar trend. Corporal actions have been almost forgotten in philosophical practice and sometimes even in the very life of philosophers. But corporal actions have a great and irreplaceable potential. From this perspective, an action is a link with exteriority. That's a definition that I use of action. Action as a link with exteriority. This in turn can be active or receptive. Active when they infringe, transform, affect the environment, and receptive when, using the senses, they perceive the world. At the same time, in addition to corporal actions, there are discursive actions about which most has been analyzed. For example, a favorite representative in the treatment of this is John Austin, but you can find a lot of philosophers that thought on discursive actions. Since discursive actions have already been talked about a lot, are well known, and are also widely used within the field of philosophy and philosophical practices, let's dedicate ourselves to think about what happens and how we can use the great potential of corporal actions for this task. Let's delve into thinking how corporal actions can benefit or enrich the work of philosophical counseling, philosophical workshops, philosophy for with children, or philosophy in organizations. The first level that I'm going to present here consists of observing or perceiving our interlocutors and the acts they carry out. To make use of these perceptions within the process of philosophical practice. Sensitivity to expressions of the subjectivity of the other is in general one of the most important capacities of those who dedicate themselves to doing this type of work. It is the capture of gestures or movements, that is, bodily actions carried out by our consultant, group, or people of the organization with which we are working. By training this sensitivity and managing to capture these actions as part of the significant processuality in the other, I can then do different things. Not always once you observe an interesting attitude or action, it will be time to state something about it. Sometimes it's just a matter of retaining it to spread it later, connected with other elements that can give more argumentative force to the circumstance or to the philosophical process in which we are working. But if they have significance, sooner or later, those observed elements have to be used by the consultant or practical philosopher, even more if they are repeated and linked something similar to what Ran Lahab calls patterns. Ran Lahab called patterns when you are repeating something Well, in that way, I am taking this concept to analyze specifically the corporal actions. However, this is the first level of approach with corporal actions in philosophical practice. It is the level where the practical philosopher observes the bodily action of the other and uses them, thinks about them, and connects with the hypothesis building process, or returns them, questioning what the other does. Why, when I was saying what I say, did the shape of your gaze change? Why did you raise, tremble your voice? Why did your arms started to move more broadly when you expressed that point to me? My perspective does not adhere to the idea of non-verbal language. I can develop that if you have questions about it, but I prefer to continue. But this is the first level I would like to enter. Um, the verbal expressions of the speakers have a set of emotions, intuitive thoughts. We can be captured by the consultant or practical philosopher of certain expertise. Therefore, what is at stake here is the use on our part of receptive type bodily actions, perceptions, to capture the intuition of the others, the emotional aspects that are movements towards oneself, but that have great significance in everything that is happening. This is the first use of bodily actions that I want to highlight here, that the philosopher perceives the other and takes advantage of that perception. The context of the perceptions are useful because they are not present in the discursive contents that the other states. They could be irreplaceable keys to development of a course of philosophical meaning that could otherwise be escaped by missing out on great opportunities. It is not enough for the practical philosopher to listen. He must also hear, see, smell, and feel. Finally, feeling is possibly the high, complex, and refined extension of touching ourselves, as Antonio Damasio insinuates. And also you can see Antonio Damasio ideas in the Descartes mistake book. The perception of the other is a first level when the very important for the development of any philosophical practice. Although this possibly also applies to all kinds of disciplines that involve working with others, such as psychology, education, sociology, human resources, etc. This type of skill must be trained and studied as much as our analytical and critical capacity for listening, as we normally study and train in the philosophical practice formation. Well, we have spoken of a first level, the consultant of a practical philosopher perceives. A second level is that the consultant or practical philosopher actively act, intervene in the world. The transition from the receptive to active, from perceiving to doing, is usually not so easy. This is because the active implies the receptive and not other way around. The active is a more complex and elaborate process. For example, I cannot insert a needle into a needle holder, which normally has holes for it, if I don't see where the hole is, how the needle holder is positioned, where is the needle, etc. I can see the needle holder and the needle without the need to perform any active corporal action. But there is no way I can place the needle without perceiving what I am doing, apart than doing it. Always the active corporal actions require more processuality. If I am anesthetized my arm and my hand, so I wouldn't feel the movement I am making. And if I also blindfolded myself, I will have no way of knowing whether or not my hands is putting the needle in the right place. Active corporal actions require self-perception of action. This is a basic principle of corporal action. Therefore, active corporal action is always more complex and more difficult to carry out, both for the practical consultant or philosophers, and also for the consullee, individual, group, or organization with which one is working. But let's see what kind of active corporal actions we can take for our philosophical role. Here I'm referring to all kinds of body gestures, actions linked to environment, faces, or expressions. How it works is interesting because in this case, I am doing certain things. I am doing certain things because they are perceived. It is possible that I actually possesses the feelings that give or would give rise to such movements of my face, hands, gaze, gestures, etc. But in these cases, I propose exacerbate them due to the effect they generate. I cannot see my faces directly because I am not normally in front of a mirror, but I have the perception and memory of my muscles from other times that I have moved them in that way. I also observe the reactions that this generate in the others. So the perceptions of my face or gestures is indirect, but I can give them a course, and this allows me to keep them and to keep them nuances. Couldn't this be thought as a form of manipulation? It's a question, interesting question. Uh, no way. Uh, all I do in philosophical practice is a ping pong of reactions and interactions. Are the questions of a Lippmannian, Nelsonian, Breniferian, Lahavian philosopher innocent? Of course not. All of them are done with the intention of generating an effect, not to make the other think as I think or do what I want him to do, but to move the other from his self-blamed minority of age, as Kant called it, to remove the other from the comfort of crystallized, closed, or routine thinking. Was Socrates authentic in all his reactions and interlocutions? It's difficult to say that Socrates did not know about the effect of his exacerbated amazement that sometimes ended in extremely cynical errors. Thus, Pierre Hadot attributes to him the ability to pretend to fall in love, which is related to this apparently innocent approach to things, which allowed him and his interlocutors to realize everything that was ignored in relation to life or the concepts that they were investigating. Emphasizing certain gestures, exaggerating certain corporal actions, insofar as they are perceived by the other and not only because they see it. This also refers to the art of philosophical practice. Many times, all I do is increase a little the feeling that naturally a circumstance within the philosophical practice generates for me. And I use the same fibers of what happens to myself to produce that reaction. This can happen, for example, if I increase a little the amazement that I show or the discomfort that a certain contradiction can cause to me. Actually, doing this kind of thing requires deep self-knowledge because it is about strategically using our own tendencies. This type of voluntary exaggerated reaction could be useful for the people with whom we are working and help them delve into certain points of great importance thanks to this performative reaction. Other times, I must go even further and bring form within me some reaction that perhaps is not so natural for me to present at that moment. For example, sometimes when I am working with teenagers, and this is an example that I often cite, young people do not want to be given such close attention. If one is excessively interested in knowing about them and understanding them, this generates rejection and distance because, due to their age, they mainly want to be accepted without too much analysis. That's something a bit international. However, philosophical work often require a careful analysis of what is said or done. Therefore, one must assume a position of a certain disinterest, although this is not our most spontaneous attitude. This little forcing of oneself allows the others to open up in a spontaneous and much more natural way, improves the bonds, and finally allows us to possibly reach extremely different results. In general, this second use of bodily actions refer to understand them as provocations or interpellations. I took that term from Levinas, interpellations, towards the others. But these possibilities are not only a simulation or a forcing of ourselves. If we did so, surely our interlocutors would catch this falsehood of self-imposition, and we would have a more damaging than beneficial result. The important thing is to be able to use our own resources to build an action so that, although this is generated to produce an effect, and it is at the same time an authentic development. And this is so because it arises from the authentic desire that the other can deepen and know himself more. In Buddhism, this is called skillful means, where the Buddha is said to shape his teaching according to the disciple's abilities, time, and circumstance. Sometimes a great teacher seems to be furious, but maybe he is not that way. Sometimes he seems calm, although thousands of storms erupt inside him. The so-called wise men of the different times and traditions undoubtedly use this form of bodily actions consciously, produced according to its effects, because they knew of its importance and great scope. Today, the philosophical practice can and must certainly also be enriched with these kinds of possibilities. The third type of use of corporal actions within the philosophical practice that I want to highlight has to do with requesting or counselee, guest, group, or organization with which we are working to carry out corporal actions by himself. This also includes taking actions together with them. The actions that the other could do can be perceptions or interventions, corporal actions of an active nature. But in this case, the practical philosopher has designed or designs in the course of work, a proposal for the other to do things that go beyond analysis or discourse. Although, of course, they can be combined with them. In ancient Mexico, in the philosophical schools of the Mexicas, called Calmecac or Tepochcali, the Tlamatinimes, sage or philosophers of these traditions, permanently use this type of exercise or practice. I will say a little quotation. In this way, it is how the Tlamatinime fulfill their mission of making wise the face of the others. And if we remember what was said about the series of acts of external customs kept in the Calmecac, we will see that its inflexible rigidity, which could be described as hardness, was precisely aimed at giving strength to the dynamic aspect of the personality, to the heart. Through this series of disciplined acts and penances, the human will was formed, capable of controlling itself. It seems then that what the Tlamatinime were looking for with their education in the Kalmekak was to perfect the personality of their disciples in their two fundamental aspects, giving wisdom to face and firmness to hearts. Close to the finish the quotation. This was also the case in various Hellenistic schools, such as the Stoic school or the Garden of Epicurus. Those who entered there underwent an arduous discipline of life that involved doing all kinds of activities and certain very special types of coordinations of coherence in the course of their actions. Or colleagues of that times, without a doubt, glimpsed the importance and irreplaceable effect of carrying out corporal actions for the development of a philosophical process. Obviously, the variety of corporal actions that we would request or propose to our visitor or group in a session of philosophical practices could be of the widest variety. An interesting type of job that has to do with asking for perception, asking for perceptions, asking the other to look, touch, smell, hear, or taste. This could be done with specific objects that we select at the moment, depending on what is happening or on something we have prepared for the session. For several years, I have been doing philosophical consultations using objects, and it is quite interesting for the creative possibilities that arise from analogical thinking and manipulation. Of course, here it is a combination of corporal actions of an active and receptive nature, and also discourse. It is also very interesting to create perceptual connections with various contexts that foster interesting trends in the processes. This context can be close to the space where we are working, or they can be previously arranged with the individual or group for the generation of a certain type of work. The mere fact of dialogue in a different place can make a big difference due to the perception that operates simultaneously with a dialogue or reasoning. Of course, we can also actively request do all sorts of things as part of the session work. This can be done by requesting that the other do things in front of us during the session, whether we have prepared such requests or not, or through philosophical tasks that complement the work that is done in the meeting, for example. I will give some examples for this later. Also, we can actively perform corporal actions together with the other. This last possibility is extremely interesting, extremely interesting. Another useful classification to glimpse the myriad of possibilities in all kinds of these is the distinction between creative and critical corporal actions. I refer on that in another text also. There really is a big difference between one and the other. I will try to explain it with an example. If we ask a person with whom we are working to approach their relatives in an everyday situation, but that instead of doing all kinds of things to please them, as we suppose he usually does, just keep still and focus on his individual development. Here we have a clear example of a critical corporal action that we could introduce in a philosophical counseling work to deal with the subject, for example, of complacency with others. If, on the other hand, we were with a group of people addressing this same topic, complacency to the others, but you wanted to work with it through creative corporal actions, you would do something else. You could, for example, invite them to play a game with one goal to accomplish. Suppose solve a puzzle game, but we should solve it in different ways. First, very focused in ourselves. Secondly, supporting each other. Thirdly, exaggerating this support to each other. After making these games, we would analyze and delve in different points, being able to continue with other games that continue working on this same axis or doing other kinds of things depending on the session. In any of the two cases, I am not looking to show how it is that one lives or should live the aspect of complacency with others. Philosophical practice does not operate like some somewhat superficial versions of coaching, which seek to literally show a certain predefined route with a corporal action. That's not what we do. For us, corporal actions are experiments. They fulfill the same function as the questions, only that they operate multidimensionally. When a question is asked in philosophical practice, we really don't know the answer, or it does not matter as much what we know. We listen the other's response, and from there we build with that material. Now it's exactly the same. We do not always invite the performance of a certain corporal action because it shows what must be done. Sometimes, on the contrary, we do it because of its problematizing nature. I have called it this problematization with bodily actions, and it's extremely interesting in the field of philosophy with children or in all kinds of philosophical practices due to its provocative and revealing meanings. Above all, it is our ability to design this proposal, which is a capacity analogous to designing good questions. The corporal actions that we invite to carry out are processing devices that are linked to the existing procedurality within the person or persons with whom we work. If the practical philosopher is someone prepared to grasp those kind of process magnitude, then he can easily imagine what kind of active corporal actions to propose. We can sometimes, and with some practice, design them during the session itself, and later, after a few minutes of listening and seeing the other, propose them directly, as well as a good coordinator of philosophical workshops of any kind can improvise questions. But we can also plan them. Of course, the sessions in philosophical practice must be planned. Sometimes, due to some hypostation of the idea of mageutics, some people think that nothing can be planned or prepared. But this is only a rather idealistic view of the matter. The fact that there is planning does not imply, of course, total addressing. Planning is not the subject of this text, but in many occasions there is a kind of a taboo with addressing when good philosophical practice or good dialogue is always a meeting of directions, is a meeting of directions that already exist and not the absence of they. In any case, it can always happen that, based on the circumstance, what we have planned must be completely changed. We can plan, but after we could change what happened. But does not mean that planning has been in vain. Hence the famous phrase by Gilles Deleuze that says that philosophy is ultimately only a long preparation. Planning also means caring. It means thinking about the other before being there, spending time to the others and giving importance to what we do. In many occasions, without dedicating excessive amounts of time, we can design very fruitful and interesting proposals for corporal actions that end up generating unusual significance. And also we can prepare them and change them when we are with our counselee or group, etc. In all this, our empathic projective grasp is fundamental. It is the same capacity that allows us to realize whether or not a question will be out of place in a dialogue. It is also important our ability to understand what we are proposing, our eloquence, patience, and the trust that we can establish with that or those persons with whom we are working. All this favors getting them to do things that they have never even done before. When they are actions of this type, it is highly recommended that the practical philosopher carry out these actions together with the people to remove the fear and modesty that actions often generates. This is a very interesting way of working with corporal actions within philosophical practice. It is like accompanying someone to see the sunrise as the Zen master meditates with his disciples, or as when those who lived in the garden of Epicurus ate in community. It is about empathizing with the feelings and the attunement of the circumstance together with the people, living the experience together with the others. Um, as I took here a quotation of Pepe Barrientos also. In closing, I want to emphasize the fact that just as the thought or words detached of the world are empty and devoid of philosophical impact, in the same way, corporal actions that do not have a framework for reflection or dialogue are equally hollow and superficial. The relationships that we must draw between thought and action must be nurtured throughout the entire process of philosophical practice. For this, we can intersperse moments of some things and others. After performing any type of corporal action, we have to ask openly about experience so that people can freely express to us what they feel and think and put into words the acts and processes that they previously lived through. Subsequently, I can go into greater precision and deep through dialogue, and it all depends on the type of session and process I am working with and why I do it. Also, of course, I can create areas for reflecting during the action itself, investigating or speaking about interesting or pertinent point for the process. For example, I can be in the middle of an important action and I can stop the situation and naturally ask about what is happening. And it's very, very interesting way of working, especially in the critical way of working with corporal actions. Generally, extremes are not favorable. For people very prone to action, thinking will be better. For people who are true thinkers, we must create valuable disruptions in the form of corporal actions within the process. Neither of the two elements is not a viable either. Just as we cannot learn to ride a bicycle reading a book, or reading a book without taking the object where the letters and words are and see it, no human being can renounce or do anything detaching himself from acts and processes toward himself or those linked to exteriority. Now I am making that distinction again. To be able to work with all this, the practical philosopher must dispose himself completely, sparing no possibility, using all his actions and resources in order to deepen the philosophical task. Only this type of attitude of total dedication allows us to approach such a wide field of work and reach levels of interactions of philosophical value. It is easy to do, possibly not. Surely it must require a great disposition and work with oneself on the part of the practical philosopher. This is really an added value since it assures us that we are not falling into a merely mechanical or superficial work. Philosophical practice is a bed of for philosophy to be part of this society. And for this reason, practical philosophers must prepare ourselves deeply to carry out such a worthy task. The good thing, finally, is that the difficulties we encounter will give testimony that what that we can get it really worth it. Um, well, that's in general the idea. I wanted to present it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. So, dear colleagues, do you have any questions? You're welcome with your questions. Or probably discussions. You just can turn on your microphones and speak. Welcome.
I am not sure whether I understand everything what you say about corporal actions, but in general, my feeling is that for many people, it's so hard to speak and to think without being in action and interaction. And that seems to be a very fundamental way to ease discursive interactions so that we allow them to act with us. And I think that's the fundamental idea why people in different cultures try to look at the picture, to take positions in that picture, and then to speak out of the common picture. So I just wanted to say that what you, in very theoretical way, explain, and of course out of your experience, explain about how important it is to think of other things except words, is such a central idea of philosophical practice, because here we are talking about philosophizing and not, in the first place, of written philosophy. We're not talking of sentences. We speak to each other. We try to understand the other, and by that try a better understanding of ourselves as well.
Thank you very much, Mike. How we do, Nastya? First, some questions, and after I respond, or I respond every...
You just can respond one by one,
okay,
or as you wish.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Mike. I agree with you, the point that when we are thinking or speaking, we are acting in some way. We are doing actions, but the idea in this presentation is that also we could distinguish the things we do. For example, if I say to you, very interesting idea, for example, is something that I am saying. I am moving my mouth. I am moving the air inside me. I'm pronouncing through the internet, and you can listen my words. But the sound I am producing are words. That's what we call normally words. And the relation between the sound I pronounce now in English with the meaning you generate or the thing you have in yourself is arbitrary. You know, that's what Ferdinand Saussure, the classical linguist, said. That's language. You know, I am using word, this kind of code, social, now international code that is English. But if I go with you and I touch your arm and your back, it's something different. And the point is how we could include these kind of things, and also to think if these kind of things are important in what we do. Because I completely agree with you that in philosophical practices we are creating something very, very important. But how we can, how is the right combination, or how can help us to include this kind of interactions, or at which degree we are using them? No, that's what I was want to think. But I believe that they are a bit different. They are a different thing. No, they are different thing. To say to some kid, please stop, or to take the kid and to sit him, for example, is something different. What to do as philosophers?
So may I ask a question, Nastia, now?
Yeah, of course, Sandra. Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome.
David, I must say that's fascinating. Truly, truly fascinating. So I understand that at least part of what you're suggesting and what you're doing is somehow going beyond the limitations of language in terms of philosophical practice work. So you still use language, but there are certain limitations that it imposes, and you are finding ways to go beyond it. And I will, and as a kind of process of human development, human flourishing, and all that, I will illustrate something that I have been trying to do with an actual example. I will present the kind of thought experiment, and curious about how to include your perspective into this thing, right? So I'm teaching ethics, and specifically teaching ethics in a business school. And I find it just talking and presenting concepts very ineffective in terms of that people understand what I'm saying, they might even agree, but then when it comes to the moment of they making the decisions and actions, there's a huge gap between what they agree with in the classroom and what they actually do. So there was this accident with a mining company near my hometown in Brazil. 300 people died. It was a devastating thing. So many other kinds of consequences. So instead of just talking about it, I got the group of students, took there, and they saw the site, the whole destruction, and they spoke with the family members of the victims of this catastrophe and all that. And afterwards, I went back, we spent the day there, but the next day we were in the classroom trying to elaborate on the whole thing. And my thought experiment is, if instead of talking, after having that whole experience of going to the place and listening to the family members and all that, I have used your sort of approach, that could be amazingly interesting. So I really just wonder what you have to say about that.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, for me, it's also exciting, amazing to include corporal actions in what we do, because also in the normal academic teaching is not very present. But it requires something that in Argentina we call it put the body. We call it in Spanish, poner el cuerpo, to put the body in the situation. It's not easy, because if you go with your students to that place, or it's something controversial, you are there. You don't know exactly what will happen because you are not just inside the classroom. You are outside in a variable context. But in my experience, the important in this kind of works are the details, because the details, the little things, because it's not too complicated to think about this possibility or maybe to do it, but to make it as an art of working. As we study deeply in philosophical practice, for example, how to make a question, which words that the concealers said are important, in which of them we will focus. When we are working with corporal actions, it's exactly the same. And when we are doing some action, when we are performing something with the others, we are looking very precisely what they are doing. And we are keeping like photos in our minds of the important moments that happen. For example, if some students do not take we're in another part, do not take attention in what is happening, for example, or if some of them is focused in one specific image or one specific object. All these are important points. And after we take that, and also another thing that we can do is to introduce problematic questions inside the action. That's something also very, very interesting. And to create little spaces of dialogue, you have to consider the context, obviously, to have the possibility to do it then. But if you can, sometimes interesting. And can be a mixture by something spontaneous that you decide in the moment and something that you can prepare before. Thank you very much, Andre, for telling us your experience. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Let me just, it's 2 seconds. I also understood it as making it as a form of art. And I try to introduce some symbolic elements. So, for example, I wanted to say to the students before we go, these people are already in a very delicate situation. So we don't want to treat it as a kind of museum of a tragedy. You know, we need to approach this very carefully. And we will go there, we will get something from there, i.e. what we learn, but we need to leave more than we take from there. So, for example, I bought one white rose for each student, and there's a symbolic thing when after the family members of the people that I talked, each student gave a rose to the family members, and actually the connection that created between both of them, and I think it was just a humane way of approaching the thing. But yeah, thanks a lot for the
Exactly.
comments.
No, thank you, Andre, for that thing. Also, it's very important. Yeah, to create a real interaction with the context, of course. In the way I work, we do that interaction step by step. For example, as we were doing a research, first we know about the context. In the second moment, we go, but without interacting too much, step by step, to be sensitive to that reality. And after doing every interaction, we go and we discuss. We normally take about from the situation a philosophical concept. That's not the only method, but it's a way to do it. We take a philosophical concept, specifically the most critical concept that was present in the last intervention, and we go into a critical dialogue, but is completely linked with the actions we did before, and also taking the situations inside, not just abstract dialogue, you know. And then we decide the next step together. I like to do like this, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions. Anybody wants to ask the question with the voice? Or we have several questions in the chat.
I have a question, which
Welcome.
will be, you were saying earlier that there's a different way to approach people that are either too thinker or too action driven. So would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on that? How you think you should really try to connect with people that is way too thinking versus people that is way too prompt to action in this kind of therapy?
Okay, thank you, Sean. And then we can continue with the chat questions. Yes, well, we can do this if we are working with an individual, with a group, or with an institution. Is similar, but it's easier to think in an individual because it's simpler. So, for example, you can have some person. It's very frequent, this type of people that normally go to the action. If they feel they have to do something, they do it. If they feel they need to react, they react. That's normal. There's some kind of people who are like this. We perceive this, mainly we perceive it looking at the consoli responses. If he or she is not, for he or she is not common to reflect, if you make questions and it's difficult for him to respond, and also if it's difficult to go deeper, if it's difficult to give arguments, we see, and I also use the first type of corporal actions, the perceiving the other, and I perceive him or her, and I see, he is doing a lot of things, he's moving a lot, he is acting all the time. So in that case, first is important my performance, my own performance as counselor, and I need to calm myself. I create kind of corporal problematization. The other is coming with a lot of corporal movement, but I stop all my movements and I start to speak more slowly because I want that he understand every word I say. And I leave enough time for every question. I start to go into the thinking dimension because that person do not usually use it. But if I have the opposite way, because, for example, we as philosophers has a lot, that's that situation, people who normally think a lot, but do not make actions in relation with reality, I also can perceive that because that person start to speak a lot, and he want to give a lot of arguments and ideas and that stuff. So when I perceive that, I need to create a performative problematization also, because this will be surely very useful for the process. Also, as I was saying to Andre, it's an art to create this kind of problematization because it's very, very strong. The person will not support it because maybe he normally think all like hours after actioning one thing. So maybe I can go out to the place. I say, please, can you come out with me? Okay, I go slowly because the person need to think a lot, and maybe we go out and see something. And I mark something. I say, wait, can you see this? And I am not saying why I am doing that, But because I perceived before his attitude, I changed my own attitude to the opposite. Now it's a way of corporal problematizations to enrich the process. But first, we perceive the other, and then we decide what to do. And when the other is reacting, I obviously change also my reaction. It's like a dance, you know, when you are, a dialogue is like a dance, and interaction also is like a dance when we are in a philosophical process. I don't know if I could respond, Joan, to your question.
Yes, that was very good. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. We have questions in the chat.
Yeah, in the chat we have, like, the first question that came to us was from Yamini. Am I right? Does total dedication make the practitioner innocent while provoking reaction in the guest through his actions?
I mean that through total dedication, that as David was talking about, how when the practitioner is performing some corporal actions, he is in a way manipulating. So does total dedication provide some ground for innocence in the practitioner? Like when his actions become are in sync or are natural in a way to provoke some reaction in the guest. Do I make sense?
Okay, I think I understood more. I will try to respond, and you tell me please if I am responding. When I say total dedication, I mean, you know that normally philosophy is viewed as something difficult. Not all, the classical idea that not all can be philosophers, because to be philosopher is something a bit difficult. I agree just in some way with that idea, but I agree because I really believe that philosophy is not something easy. And I really believe that if we are doing philosophical practice, what we do is to believe in the possibility that the growing of society, that there can be a lot of people with a lot of dedication in what they do. Because for my perspective, it's not possible to do this kind of work without, Yamini, a lot of dedication to put all your actions, to put all your possibility in this position for the other. You need to live what you just want to do, because maybe your natural reaction will be calm. For example, I will take the example you took also. But I see that for this specific person, he need a strong approach. For that reason, I say, it's very strange what you are doing. I can't believe it, what you say. For example, I am taking the force of maybe I feel, how can I explain it? It's not something you not feel. You are taking your own feelings and you are making them growing through understanding that that attitude and that change create an interesting effect in the other. You are using your own body to create a better situation for the other. And to do that, you need to have a total dedication. And now, for that, I didn't say it before. I took some very, very interesting, I recommend you, philosophical practitioner, that is Narel Archidiácono. She worked with something called dramatic philosophy, and also she took ideas from Grotowski, the classical theater director, and that. So the idea is an organic corporal action. It's not artificial. That's the difficulty. And why is organic? Is organic because you are completely there. The most important thing for you is that process. For that reason, you are giving all yourselves to that. It's like the ancient wises that I said also. I don't know if I can reach something of what you wanted to ask.
Can I just ask you to please repeat the name of the author of this dramatic philosopher that you mentioned?
Yes, of course.
Probably it's better to type it in our chat.
Yeah.
Or
I
others
wrote.
see.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Great. So, and also we have one unanswered question from Pepe Barrientos in a chat. Pepe, would you be so actually, can you join us with the voice, probably?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Great. First of all, congratulations, David, because I knew your theory, but you are developing it. So thank you very much for the new ideas. And I think that it is a very important way of making philosophical practice, that it is not against a discursive way, but it is a complement, because we are more than ideas, we are bodies, we are experience, and we are another things. And in relationship with the experience that is my theory, my question is, you are trying to use corporal actions to make some kind of transformation in the person, some kind of changes. But as you know, in my experience philosophical practice, I say in some occasion the experience make a change, and in another occasion the experience doesn't make a change. So the question is there any attitude or something that can make more possible that a corporal action can introduce a change in a people, in the person? And then it is a provocative question, okay? The second is, how can we philosophize in the corporal tetraplegic person? The second question is more a quest, something who cannot move. Can we philosophize, or it's not possible, or is this a crazy idea, or I don't know? Thank you, David.
Thank you, Pepe. Yeah, as you said, I know and I appreciate a lot also your experience in theory to go into philosophical practice. For my point of view, there are not some specific actions that I can say those actions are more philosophical and these actions are not philosophical, for example, or are less philosophical. Because every subject is very different. And as I understand philosophy is like a trend. It's like a current that is inside the being. It's a way of connecting all what we are, all the acts we perform in the world, as Husserl said. For example, the thinking acts, the emotions, the perceptions, the active corporal actions, and we are creating, sometimes we are not connected, we are not linked with what we believe, for example. And if some philosophical counseling or workshop is good, it's connecting yourself with what you are and what you believe. And it's creating this kind of current. But this current can be so different in every case. For that reason, for me, it's very difficult to say that, okay, to be calm is better than being active, for example. No. Well, I understand, and I also know your Maria Zambrano influence, and I appreciate really your ideas about that. I think that they are very useful. But in my point of view, in general, I cannot say that there are some attitudes, some base philosophical attitudes, more than to be completely for the other and to use all our capacities to create this philosophical process with the other. And well, about the tetraplegic people, it's very interesting because also there are a lot of applications nowadays in philosophical practice with this kind of context, with people who are blind, with people who have these disabilities in general, to work with philosophical actions, corporal actions. The people should move at least something. If they are completely, if they cannot move at all, okay, we will see what you do, because at least Steve Hopkins could move a little part of his mouth, and moving, creating this little movement. The scientists create a machine that did code that, and we understood what he wanted to say. At the end, he could move some little part of his body. If we have problems to move, okay, we deal with that. It's very interesting to deal with this situation. I have worked once with one person like this, and it was really interesting. Was not completely tetraplegic, but with some disability. Was very interesting to use the corporal action in that situation also, because probably in that moments, for that people, they are not used to use their bodies too much, or maybe they consider that they can't use their bodies to express or to manifest what they are. So I think that it's very interesting case if you work with them. Do you think there are body postures that favor philosophical reflection? Well, this is similar that what Carmen?
Sorry.
Carmen?
Yes, David, thank you. My microphone is was closed. The first, thank you for sharing this idea of philosophy through the body. I think about the moment when I work with children, and whether it's possible to suggest any postures that promote the philosophical reflection. I am.
Yeah. Of course, normally to think, and I really like to understand thinking, including feelings, emotion, not only rational thinking. We normally, all the neurosciences today, nowadays, consider that rationality without the other parts of our brain are just nothing. I'm sorry for Kant, but rationality without the body and the feelings do not work too much. Well, that's at least my perspective. But anyway, when we are referring to ourselves, That's what I call thinking, referring to ourselves, linking with ourselves in any way, in a corporal way, in a sensation way, in a feeling way, in a rational way. In a rational way is like the Wittgensteinians say to say words to ourselves. I like this idea of Wittgenstein. Say words to ourselves. That's the rational auto-referential acts. So to do all that, we need to stop a little bit what we are doing. To create a reflection of some situation, we need to stop. That's something that Oscar Brenny-Freer said frequently because he liked a lot to work with reflection, and probably he understands that philosophical practice is more that, and I accept this, but it's a bit different of considering also the body. But also I am considering that this is really, really important, the reflection, and it's really, really important in any kind of philosophical practice. So our attitudes to generate that reflections are very important. For example, if we are in the case that Andres said, and we go to a very difficult context in which the people are suffering, and we see that, and we interact with them, and we return to the classroom or to the room we were working. I need to first to be calm, and then to start considering, to reflect about what happened, start taking the ideas, start ordering the ideas. And if I want to promote that, first I sit the people in some place, and also the people who do philosophical practice. We know that it's important how we sit or group. It's not the same if we do a circle, as you know, Carmen, that we do in community of inquiry of Lippmann's proposal, for example. But this is a disposition, a corporal disposition. To sit us in a circle is a corporal disposition. To sit us in front of the other in a consultation is also a corporal disposition. If there is a table in the middle of me and the other, it's different that if it's not. How close I am from the other also is important to create a reflection. Normally, the reflection requires distance from the situation. If I am very, very affected, I need to take distance. And I create that disposition, for example, thinking in an abstract way. And also the corporal distance is important. I am in a different place. I am in a calm place, for example. To be in a calm place is useful to reflect, for example. And if I am not in a calm place, I have to look how to achieve it. For example, if I am doing consultation to some person from whom it's very difficult to reflect, and every time he or she put the microphone on, I listen a lot of noise, I have to tell to that person that we need a different disposition to reflect. Well, there are a lot of things to say, but it's important. If we want to create a reflecting disposition, yes, we have a lot of attitudes, a lot of corporal attitudes that generate them. Yeah.
I have one. Would you be so kind to answer my question? So actually, I noticed that you said that in Argentina you have your very own concept that is called put the body into situation, right? And in English, like in English culture, there is a concept embodiment. And do you see any intersections here? And is this concept of embodiment is widely used in the discourse around you? So what can you say about embodiment in general?
I like the concept embodiment. in some way is linked. Yes, but when we in Argentina say put the body, poner el cuerpo, when we say that, we are saying that we are taking some risk. It's not very, very calm, because to be thinking, to be discussing, could be this or could be that, it's okay. But if you put the body, maybe it could be similar or not, it depends, but could be, you are taking some risks. You are leaving the security of just what you know, what will happen. Normally, for in general, as a systemic trending of the corporal action, as I said in the presentation, is more difficult to use them than the discursive actions. For example, if some people have, how can I say, shame, embarrassment, I no, I cannot. I can speak, but when I have to go, my face get red. Is that's because in general we are breaking something when we do things, especially when we are doing things that have a deep meaning, and to look and to distinguish which actions have this kind of deep meaning is really, really important, to be very sensitive to that. And also, it's not only to know them, also is to go with the other, and that the other can make them. That's the real working with the other. But it's nice. I like the concept, yes, of embodiment. Yeah, it's nice.
Thank you very much.
Can I just make, David, this is extraordinary, really fascinating work. It's so helpful. Thank you. But I would like you to excuse me for one moment, because I would like to thank you, Nastia, and all of you guys that are providing such a beautiful platform. It's such an enriching experience, and you be there all the time doing all this work, and so thank you very much as well.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you very much. So, dear friends, dear guests, as far as we do not have more questions, probably it's time to finish. What do you think? Yeah, so just let me say a few words. Actually, so David, your lecture was very emotional, and I enjoyed it very much myself. So thank you very much. And thanks for a wonderful discussion, dear colleagues, and your beautiful feedback. So, and I would like to congratulate you with the end of the second day of our online conference, and hope that you will take a breath and see you next day.
Thank you very much, Nastia. I put my email if someone wants to ask me something or information or
Yeah,
what
that's always great to collaborate, right?
And I felt also very well with the discussion. Thank you very much for your questions and
Thank
comments.
you. Thank you, guys. So see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.